Welcome to another episode of the .NET Show. Developer tools are extremely important for developing great applications for Windows or the web. We're soon going to be coming out with a new version of Visual Studio 2005. It's currently codenamed Whidbey. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Whidbey, figure out what some of the features and capabilities are, as well as look at some of the additional capabilities we've added to it to help you to develop great applications in a team environment. So before we get to that, let's check in with Erica and the news.
Hello, I'm Erica Wiechers. Welcome to the MSDN News Update. At TechEd 2004, Microsoft announced the immediate availability of Web Services Enhancements 2.0, a supported add-on to Microsoft Visual Studio .NET and the Microsoft .NET Framework that enables developers to more easily build and consume security-enhanced web services using the latest Web Services Protocol specifications. Developers can use WSE to more easily enhance web services security by incorporating WS Security, including WS Policy, WS Security Policy, WS Trust, and WS Secure Conversation. Also at TechEd, Microsoft announced Visual Studio 2005 Team System, an extensible lifecycle tools platform that helps software teams collaborate. Visual Studio Team System is part of the Microsoft Solution System, which integrates process guidance, prescriptive architectures, and lifecycle tools for successfully deploying solutions on the Windows Server system. In June, MSDN launched 2 new developer centers for SQL Server and Smart Clients. These developer centers offer one location to find documentation, technical resources, and community features for SQL Server and Smart Clients. Check them out at msdn.microsoft.com/SQL and msdn.microsoft.com/SmartClient. Also in June, Microsoft and PC Magazine announced the winners of the Microsoft Tablet PC Does Your Code Think in Ink contest, a competition challenging developers to build the most creative PowerToy utilities that incorporate digital ink functionality included in the Microsoft Windows XP Tablet PC Edition platform. The goal of the contest was to provide users with a new set of free PowerToys that will enrich their tablet PC experience. Individual developers across the globe submitted code in competition for the grand prize of $15,000. Microsoft and PC Magazine selected 1 grand prize winner and 2 runners-up for more than 70 unique entries. And this has been the MSDN News Update. I'm Erica Wiechers.
Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Visual Studio 2005 and .NET Framework 2.0. Now, frankly myself, I find it easier to call it Whidbey, which is the code name it's been known by for so long. But here to talk to us about Whidbey or Visual Studio 2005 .NET Framework 2.0, we have Aman Horowitz and Jason Zander. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
So Whidbey, what exactly is Whidbey? Is it just a development tool?
Go ahead. Whidbey is very much about developer productivity. We're trying to make the next version of the .NET Framework as well as the Visual Studio tools go that next extra mile. Try and make it very good for people to be able to write code very quickly, very easy, get those applications out there very quickly. Just as one example, ASP.NET set a goal of making it so that you should be able to write 70% less code than you had to for the first 2 versions of the framework. And they were able to pull it off. You're able to generate an application that looks very professional in a very short amount of time. So that's just one good example.
70% less code.
70% less code. The system actually comes with a lot of default templates and a lot of things off on the left-hand side. You can pull them into Visual Studio. Forms authentication and things like that. You can just whip that out. Custom personalization on your page. You are able to do that with the current products, but it's just built right in. And so it's amazing how quickly you can write a new application.
So it's not that the application ends up having 70% less code. It's that the developer themselves doesn't have to grunge through that stuff. He's actually doing his own value add code, the code that is more conceptual to him and not having to work with templates and areas and junk like that.
Yes, that's correct. So you could write all of this stuff yourself and go write all the low-level HTML and all the validation logic and things behind that. This new features allows you to pull those right into your application, take advantage of it in much the same way that while you could have been writing a lot of low-level collection handling code, array code, things like that, the .NET Framework provides that for you. And so this is very similar, only it's for writing, visual applications on the web.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting aspect of this is we're really using a different approach, not a one-size-fits-all approach to enable this. So the code savings that Jason's talking about are available throughout the multiple versions of Visual Studio that we're going to ship to customers. In the ASP.NET example, the code reductions are focused on HTML and the web case. In the VB case, for example, the code reductions are focused around improvements in working with data, designing forms. In the device space, improvements would be around integrating native development. In the Visual Studio team system, improvements would be around getting the team to work better together and understand the end-to-end product of building and its status at every given point in time.
Now, in the past, back in the days of C 4.0, 5.0, and stuff like that, the big benefits from one release to the next was more of compiler speed and compact code size and stuff like that. It sounds like now the focus is turning more towards making the tool itself have functionality as a tool, not necessarily as a compiler and linker, that actually allows the developer to get better productivity by having capabilities that they wouldn't have had before because the tool's doing things for them. Is that kind of the direction things are moving?
Right, that's correct. I mean, make no mistake, we're still super excited and passionate about compiler speed and linker speed, but we are focusing a lot of our efforts into just streamlining the development process through integration of the individual tasks the developer needs to accomplish in order to build this code. And also through trying to pay specific attention to fit and finish to the type of developer who's actually doing the work and their work environment.
Mm-hmm. What is the type of developer that you see Woodby being mostly focused at?
So it's an interesting question because actually Woodby is focused on a whole range of developers. On one end, you'd have the maybe high school student or business person who's trying to learn Visual Basic for the first time. And on the other extreme end, you have the super high-powered architect who's managing a team of 100 people who are building a complicated product. And Woodby tries to cater to them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we work very closely with all of those segments. As an example, I spent in San Diego at TechEd, visiting with a lot of different customers, and I talked with folks that are doing everything from writing, rich client applications that they're running in big IT departments, people writing websites that are either externally available or internally as well as ISVs that are writing shrink wrap software that may actually come with peripherals and things like that that you purchase. So we've got the whole wide spectrum, and that doesn't that's just on the desktop. It doesn't even include the devices space, which we've also invested very heavily in.
Mm-hmm. Now, you brought up an interesting topic there. You talked in one sentence, you mentioned both smart client applications and web applications. In my mind, those are like almost two different beasts. Don't you kind of think it's a little bit kind of strange to have both of them being focused at with one development tool?
Well, I think that there are benefits to both of those models. Obviously, that we've gone back and forth between the two. There's a lot of rich environment. It's easy to deploy on the web, and ASP.NET, like I said, is very productive, and you're able to write great things. I think that one of the things you do find, however, is at some point the browser as an interface for doing some level of computing starts to get in your way. And from that perspective, the rich client is actually, can be a friendlier environment. And so, I think a good balance between the two, a nice segmented architecture that allows me to take advantage of both of those. I don't think the rich client, will go away from that perspective. There's lots of great apps. I mean, Office is one good example.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think if a developer is using your tool for developing a web app, do you think that there is a crossover for them also doing a smart client application, or are you using one or the other when you're using Visual Studio?
So there are developers who do just one type, and there are developers who do both. The interesting question in my mind is not entirely who does what type of application, but what innovations are specific to one type of developer, and what innovations are actually cross the boundaries of the type of developer and are applicable to all. And that's one of the interesting challenges we've had with building Woodby is trying on one hand to make sure we absolutely nail the end-to-end scenarios for developers who are going about implementing a specific task or specific application type, yet try to share as much code and innovation between those scenarios on the things that are not specific to that app type.
Mm-hmm. So if I was a developer at Ford, for instance, what do you think would make me most excited about what's coming in Visual Studio 2005?
So Ford is a large enterprise, and I assume that some of the application that as a developer in Ford you'd be involved in would be enterprise applications that involve a team of people who are working together to build a complex system. Visual Studio Team System is going to be very exciting.
Now, Visual Studio Team System, it's the first time we've mentioned that. What exactly is that?
So Visual Studio Team System is a foundation for a team development system that we shipped for the first time in Visual Studio 2005. It's actually, I think we're going to actually demo it later today, but the general idea is that there is a set of team services, such as source code control, configuration and management, issue tracking, work item tracking, schedule tracking, requirements.
Isn't this just kind of like SourceSafe though, or is it different?
So SourceSafe is just the source code control management aspect. But the foundation is in those services, but where it really shines is in the integration between the pieces. So one of the things you can do is in the same IDE, in the same end-to-end experience, you can go through a scenario where you deal with, say, an issue or work item and immediately drill down into your code, make a change, go back to the work item definition, mark off the things you've done. And it's really the integration and the automation of the workflow that brings out the value in the team system.
Mm-hmm.
And then also related to the enterprise at the framework level, one of the key things that we've done is introduce click once for deployment of rich client applications. So Ford Motor Company, being a very large corporation, obviously has to deal with new versions of applications that roll out. We do this internally at Microsoft as well. How do you make the departmental application that comes out once every 3 months? How do you make that easy to get around the enterprise? So we've introduced things like that. I would also expect that with a large team, the other thing is just beyond the team system pieces, the actual developer working every day, typing in that code and getting that done. They're quite likely writing in Visual Basic. We have added a lot of RAD development experience back into Visual Studio, which has been a collaboration between the .NET Framework and Visual Studio. Things like edit and continue, where I can be editing my code, find a bug, go fix it right there, and keep the application running without restarting. And some additional things like that are tremendous developer productivity wins.
Because that was a big thing that when VB.NET first came out, people had been used to that with Visual VB6. They were concerned.
Yes, we heard that feedback very loud and clear. Yeah. And we actually did want it to continue in the original product, and it turns to be quite complicated to go implement in the environment. So we were very happy to bring it back online and get it into the system, as well as some additional changes Amnon could probably describe in Visual Studio itself.
So when you say the original product, you mean the first version of Visual Studio?
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's all about kind of keeping you in the zone as a developer and really automating and integrating as much as the work you do, whether it's kind of the micro work when you're focused on debugging a single section of code and iterating through it and using edit and continue to make your changes and make sure they're good, and kind of at the macro level of integrating your source code control changes and your work item, your communication with the rest of the team, really making that shine. Mm-hmm. That's the goal.
Now, with Visual Studio being so focused on writing .NET framework applications, I mean, I know a lot of people in my audience are currently writing managed code. They're enjoying the capability to think with managed code. But there's also some people out there that aren't quite yet ready for one reason or another to do managed code applications. Are we doing anything in Visual Studio to help them finally see the benefits of writing a managed code application and be able to develop things that maybe they couldn't have quite done in the previous versions?
So the answer is yes. Generally, we're trying to kind of mix the old with the new and enable people who have existing applications that are in native code, enable them and add to them new managed code pieces without having to rewrite the whole application. A large focus for the C++ team and would be is all about trying to take an existing large code base in C++ and enable people to add new features or make changes without taking a wholesale, I have to convert my applications to .NET approach. And that actually works very well.
That is why we invested so very heavily in things like p-invoke and com interop, right? Because you have a tremendous, investment in your current code base. There's nothing about .NET that is telling you, please go throw that out and rewrite it. We don't want you to do that. We want you to be able to maintain that investment. So we continue to invest heavily in, extending interop and making it so you can keep using that existing code base. And that'll include, allowing you at some point to migrate your applications forward to new versions of the framework that we produce. So we very much want it to be so that as you write these, you can leverage existing code that was unmanaged, keep using that. As you write against the current versions of the framework, we're going to come out with new ones. You've seen the map that goes all the way up to Longhorn with another version. And we're going to protect your investment by making those apps continue to work on the APIs going forward.
Right. And Visual Studio itself as an application is a great example of that approach. We didn't rewrite Visual Studio completely in managed code. What we've done is we've written new pieces and new functionality in .NET and integrated them with the existing native code base. So you were able to make progress and use the benefits of .NET for productivity while still keeping our investment in our existing code base. So even kind of in-house, that's what we're doing.
So do you end up spending most of your time doing new stuff in managed code, or are you finding yourself going back to some of the old legacy code and doing unmanaged code there, or you basically stop development on the unmanaged sections of it?
So we're doing both, and sometimes we even find out there's reason to take something existing and convert it to managed code, because that's the best way to go about the thing we want to achieve. But our work is really split between maintaining the existing things that are in native code and even adding features to them and writing new things in native code.
Even in the core frameworks, we found that as well. I mean, obviously, when we started the CLR engine, we couldn't execute managed code, so a big portion of it is written in unmanaged code in assembler. What we've done over time is, even as we've found reasons to go back to certain subsystems and introduce new features that are pretty major, we've rewritten those in managed code. A perfect example in Whidbey is the reflection APIs, which used to be written in unmanaged C++, and we found that since that is an API that people program against directly, it was very efficient for us when we did the rewrite to rewrite that in C#, which is what the rest of the VCL is written in. So even in the core, guts of the engine itself, we follow that same kind of model.
If you take a look at Visual Studio today, it takes a pretty experienced eye to kind of detect which pieces are in managed code and which pieces are in native code, and the whole thing just works well together.
And I'm assuming you see us sometime in the future where all of Visual Studio will be written in managed code?
We may and we may not. Really, there's no incentive to just go and wholesale rewrite Visual Studio in native code just for the heck of it. But once you begin to innovate and make changes to some fundamental architectural pieces, that will probably cause us to make fundamental changes that would require the thing to be completely in managed code. And even then, it'll be more kind of a shifting of the balance of whether it's managed code with some native code pieces or native code with some managed code pieces.
The key thing is we're giving you the capability to do that and to be able to write the whole thing in managed code, but the architecture is not dictating that you must do that in order to take advantage of it. We're trying to take a very pragmatic approach for project management and release cycle reasons. We wouldn't want to simply go rewrite it just for the sake of doing it, but the architecture allows you to do that, and I would expect people that are watching this to be trying to do the same thing and make that same analysis for their choice. They get to be very deliberate. You get to decide at what pace you'd like to do that and take advantage of it. What I found is that as my developers wind up, typing in more managed code, they realize their own productivity benefits, and with that, you get more people that are even more interested in wanting to write code on that side of the fence. Automatic memory with garbage collection and other things like that just make your life as a programmer that much easier to get your own code done. So we've seen that internally with lots of new systems that you've seen. If you've seen Longhorn, all the pillars there with Indigo and Avalon, for example, all being written in managed code.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm assuming you guys get a chance to go out and talk with some of the customers, whether it's at Tech Ed or PDC or stuff like that. What do you see as some of the issues that some people out there might have of not going to managed code? What are some of the problems that they're facing? What are some of the details that they're needing either us to help them resolve or they're needing to resolve in their own businesses?
So there's two types of issues. One is the message that we're really not trying to convince people to go wholesale to manage code is not being heard clearly enough. And people kind of make the assumption that if you're going to use .NET, then you have to go rewrite your application, and that's just not true. And so people kind of perceive this as kind of an upfront cost that you have to go through. And they don't understand that it's kind of a pay-as-you-go thing. And I think that's clearly something we've been hearing from customers, and we hope to try and change that perception.
So you think some of it is a misconception?
Some of it is misconception, yeah. Another part of it is, and Jason alluded to this before, really when we shipped Visual Studio.NET, we have made a fundamental investment in the new architecture, but we didn't really have parity for some of the user experience pieces like VB6 and VB.NET. And so that has been a huge stumbling block for people because they've had to essentially learn new skills to use Visual Studio.NET. With Whidbey, we think we have achieved parity and more, and we've actually eliminated that stumbling block and actually made it easier for people who are used to VB6 to use the product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, in the past when we've talked about Visual Studio and the CLR and .NET, one of the issues that's come up quite a bit is multiple languages. And the fact that we have VB.NET, we have C#, we have C++.
We have about
plus
30 or 40 different languages that have.
Fortran and COBOL. So
yep.
Is that still a big thing to come out with having, supporting new languages and so forth like that?
My team in particular spends a lot of time doing that. I mean, obviously the C and CLRs is common. So we try very hard to make sure the different segments work very well. I would say that, COBOL and Eiffel and a few other non-Microsoft languages are probably good examples that have done well. A lot of the other languages that we have are more in the academic, space. And so, language, we want to continue to innovate there. I would say probably the biggest innovation that we've added for this version of the framework is called generics, generic types. These are fully integrated. Anders Heilsberg put it best, which is it's kind of like the ability to add parameters to your types. And so list of T and things like that become much easier to write, and they're strongly typed. We think there'd be a lot of productivity there. And that's baked completely through the engine, through all of the subsystems and things like that. It's not just syntax templates on top of the engine. It's baked all the way through. So I expect us to continue to do language innovation and try and bring those languages working well. As I said, when you get a good engine, we can tune it very well. We can give you broad deployment. It makes your life as a language writer a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. So besides the generics, what else is there new from a languaging model that the developers that are just writing C# code, the VB.NET code, are really getting excited about?
So other examples would be iterators and deeper support inside of the language itself. Visual Basic has added lots of different features, oftentimes, again, inside of the Visual Studio shell itself that aren't necessarily compiler features per se, but make it easier to author your code.
Mm-hmm.
But really the key thing here is while we're doing language innovation in each of the languages, we really believe that language is kind of a lifestyle choice. And our approach is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We're building a platform on which multiple languages can be implemented, and multiple languages have different advantages for different people. Mm-hmm. And so we're definitely are going to continue to invest in kind of the language ecosystem around Visual Studio and around .NET.
Now, earlier on, you mentioned exposing people in schools and students and stuff like that to Visual Studio and so forth like that. What are we doing specifically to assist people that aren't these big, gigantic Ford Motor Company or Boeing airplane for doing development using some of these high-powered development tools?
So as part of the Visual Studio product family, we're introducing a new set of products that we call Visual Studio Express. And those products are targeted folks who are either just interested in starting to learn about programming or about a different language, or actually, evaluate and, get acquainted with the Microsoft technology. And the key thing we've done with those Express products is, first of all, they're very small, very easy to install, very easy to download off the web or install off a CD with maybe a book about the language.
So is this kind of like the ASP Web Matrix product we had about a year ago?
Kind of a thing, kind of that thing, but also for VB and for C# and for C++. And they're also contain very simplified workflows that are targeted at the type of application that somebody who uses that product would be interested in. So, for example, there's a set of starter kits that help you build an application, kind of suggest an architecture and a project type, and what are the bits and pieces you need to write, and maybe some graphics that you can use. Then you can actually start from an extend instead of starting from nothing and building your app from scratch. So they are very much geared toward learning, evaluating, and really drop down kind of the barrier to starting to engage with the product.
And then for advanced education, the one thing I would say is that we do actually ship the source code for the common language runtime, the CLI implementation, as well as C#. It's called the SSCLI, or Rotor is the friendly name. You can download it. We work very closely with university level professors, and we have other courses being developed so people can do language technology and things like that. That's clearly a much smaller, more advanced study in that particular field. What Amnon's describing is very generally available for folks, and it's a great way to get introduced to Visual Studio and manage code.
So if someone was interested in actually understanding the core computer science level concepts of writing something like the CLR or a C# language interpreter, they could be getting this component.
Yes, if and I'll be very specific. It's a very complicated chunk of code to go do. So it's for folks that are, if you want to learn how to write a garbage collector and you want to write a compiler, that's the chunk of source code for you.
So your mom wouldn't want to?
My mom wouldn't do that. I think mom would be much, happier if she were to download the VB Express SKU and, try writing, some kind of a recipe database system. That will be fantastic. So those are kind of just two different parts of those segments.
Yeah, I mean, this VB Express and the C# Express and SKUs like that, I mean, to me sound kind of exciting because it's kind of focusing on the hobbyists that, quite frankly, I probably all of us started out as hobbyist programmers that with some computer we bought, and whether it's a TI or an Apple or a Commodore 64 or something like that, getting some inexpensive compiler and start whacking away at it. And modern day compiler system seems like they're thousands of dollars or something like that, and it's almost out of scope now of the hobbyist programmers, and it looks like we're bringing it back to hobbyists then.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's about, and it's not just about whether it's $1,000 or not. It's also about how much you need to understand before you can start doing something useful, and how long it takes you to actually get the product and install it and take your first steps. And really our goal is to enable people to be effective in learning new things very, very quickly.
Spend less of your time writing the frameworks and the custom controls and things like that, and more of your time adding business logic and value on top of that. That's the whole goal.
Now, as a platform evangelist myself, and I go out and talk to companies and individuals, I'm often talking about not only the platform's capabilities available today, but the ones that are coming down the future. We just got through finishing with several episodes talking about Longhorn and how in a few years from now, Longhorn will be the platform that we're expecting a lot of applications to be written for, but Longhorns are not out there yet. And the bits people can develop against now are pretty shaky, and I wouldn't start really developing an application on it yet. And so if someone wants to get excited about Longhorn, they really need to get started writing something today what do we have story-wise? I mean, if I'm developing code now, does that experience, whether it's with Whidbey or with the .NET Framework 2.0 or with ASP.NET, how does that assist me in translating this work into something that runs on Longhorn?
I think there's a few different aspects of that play out here. One of those is you're using managed code in all of those places. So your skill set that you learn writing managed code, understanding the base frameworks, using Visual Studio as a tool to put those applications together, completely leveraged all the way through, not a problem. And the other thing we're committing to is to those applications you're writing today, as we talked about before, we want a nice migration path. So writing those apps today, we're going to make those work on top of Longhorn. The thing that's going to be interesting about Longhorn is the operating system adds all these new pillars that you can now take advantage of. So if you'd like to use, WinFS for storage and get all these advanced features, it's another good example of you having to write less code to get all of this functionality. So all of the managed code skills you get, development skills that you get, and the code that you're writing are completely leveraged going forward, and you get to add and extend those when the new platform comes out.
And then by the time the new platform comes out, you'll be coming out with a new version of Visual Studio specifically targeted at that. As you evolve that platform forward, the development platform forward, what are some of the things and areas where you're getting some input for how to move that in that direction? I mean, are you listening to what the Fords and the Boeings are wanting out there? Are you listening to the people, the Longhorn development team? Are you listening to the .NET folks and how they're taking that forward?
So Visual Studio Whidbey is more about listening to our customers, our developer customers, and what they're looking for, and less about making developing for Longhorn super streamlined. Whidbey is going to enable development for Longhorn, but where Longhorn development is really going to shine is in the next version of Visual Studio after Visual Studio Whidbey.
But you're already beginning to think about what that means
Yes.
to have to evolve the Whidbey experience to become whatever the next version is. If you had to pick, an area of development that Ford or Boeing or General Electric, whatever, is really concerns them, and they need to see some support being provided either by Microsoft or by other companies and technologies, what do you think they're struggling with today? And then the switch of that is how does Whidbey help them?
So I think, again, the big things that people are struggling with, or the folks that have adopted the technology anyway, are things like the distribution, getting it out to, how do you roll out to 100,000 clients and make that work in a good way? How do I integrate that back with the rest of my operating system and my data center and things like that? So those are the sort of things I think people run into. And Whidbey, in terms of helping that, a couple of different things. We've already talked about Click Once. That's one good example for that. But in addition, ASP.NET, for example, is investing a lot in configuration management of servers for rich client applications. So trying to make sure that it's not only easier and quicker for you to write your applications, but also that you can administrate them better and get your data center up and running and keep it going very well. So for big clients like that, I think that's an important place to be.
No, some of that sounds like one of the learnings we've had from the web is that people like that web deployment model really well, and they like to be able to take the fact that I go to a website and I see the latest and greatest stuff. And Click Once is specifically taking and trying to take some of those learnings and allow smart client applications to have that same real super ease of deployment, so that the developers of the application just simply drop their new app on the servers and suddenly it deploys that across.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's specifically what you're talking about there.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that that kind of configuration and application compatibility is one of the biggest challenges that the entire software industry, not just Microsoft, has faced, and it's very hard, especially as your applications wind up getting more complex in terms of the features that they're adding. So I get this nice rich application. It's one of the challenges that you face as a developer is how to make sure that as I upgrade, as I put on new versions of service packs and new features I'm taking advantage of, that my apps keep working. And so we're investing very heavily in that space, trying to make that easier for folks. And Click Once is an excellent example. Just being able to deploy, the manifest out there with the version number information and letting the system itself explain whether or not you have the right version on your client machine, and having it automatically pull that down for you, and you not having to go write a lot of sophisticated code to make that happen. That makes your life a lot easier.
Yep. People are also struggling with how to plan their deployment and how to make sure they've actually figured out where all the pieces they need to take care of during deployment. And there are some tools in the Visual Studio Team system that enable developers to think about deployment in the design phase and actually validate that all the deployment requirements of the code they're actually writing are met. And calls to servers that are not available are kind of caught on and flagged and can be fixed before actually doing a pilot of deployment.
I think the cool thing about that is that up until now, we spent a lot of time focusing on the developer in their office, writing their code and with some deployment as well. But here's an example where you're pulling in more of the IT part of your operation and trying to figure out, what do the different zones look like and how should my code be architected in a way that when it is deployed in that very complex environment, it'll work well. So it's great having the tools there and not having people, just kind of stumble through there. So it's an excellent advantage.
So you're saying the team service is kind of adding a layer of architectural support to what previously was a development system that really didn't do much architecturally with the application. It allowed the developer to work with the app, develop the source code, have all those capabilities at the code level, but not really at the upper deployment and architectural model.
Right, that's correct. And what we've done in the past is we've provided technology on the platform side to kind of help you with deployment, but we provided a little support to actually help you think through what you needed to do. And now with Visual Studio Team System, we are taking a big leap in that direction.
I understand another area that we've added to what we'd be supporting is SQL Server. We've got some additional support in there for how SQL is dealing with stuff. How does that really tie in to things?
So what we've done there is we've introduced the ability to host the CLR inside of the Yukon release of SQL Server 2005. That allows you to take all of the skills that you've learned writing managed code in C# or Visual Basic .NET and extend those back to the database itself. So I can now write stored procedures in those languages on the back end. Again, keeping with the theme we talked about before, you don't toss out what you already had. You will continue to use T-SQL for writing your stored procedures, and what you will be able to do now is pick areas where perhaps T-SQL wasn't appropriate. For example, very intensive computing operations and things like that, which in the interpretive mode don't work very well. Now you get the power of a JIT compiler, right? That I can basically generate code on the fly, optimize it, and we've seen tremendous speed gains from that. So again, it's all about leveraging your skills and being able to use those in multiple places. And that's another key architectural theme that we're pushing with the .NET framework, is to try and make sure that, if I'm writing database code, I understand it. As I'm writing code for the operating system, I understand that. And I expect us to continue to do that in places where people want to write code.
Whereas, before we had what you call a bright line between the database portion of your application and the smart client or web client server side of your application. We now have gotten rid of that bright line, and so it's not a no man's land between them.
Certainly from a development standpoint, I can now again leverage the skills of the folks who understand how to write that kind of code. From a DB administrator's point of view, the line clearly still exists. They have complete control. I want to make sure that I mention that. But yeah, it allows you to take advantage of your productivity and be able to do more than what you used to be able to do with just T-SQL alone.
So
it goes back to, language is a lifestyle choice, right? And by enabling that, we're enabling another lifestyle choice and enabling another type of code reuse and skill reuse between the two things that up to now we're kind of disconnected.
So in the past, we've been really harping on developers to do managed code, do managed code, do managed code. I mean, I don't think there's been an episode of the .NET show that hasn't had, do managed code.
Good. Good for you.
We're now extending that message out to database developers and saying, you now have an opportunity to do managed code as well. The stuff you've been hearing about what managed code does for the C developer, the VB developer, and so forth like that, you can now take advantage
That's
of
correct. And solve a couple of very specific problems that people have had, like getting rid of extended stored procedures, as an example, which are kind of like the device driver of the database. They drive you nuts and can cause lots of corruption and issues like that. So solving very specific issues like that, but again, it's the key. It's the developer productivity and being able to use that, basically any place you might want to go write code.
Okay. Well, I think you've given us some really great information about what Visual Studio 2005 and the .NET Framework 2.0 and ASP.NET is all about. In closing, are there any key messages you think you want to make sure the audience understands about your product so that they use it properly, are prepared for it, and get excited about writing managed code?
Yeah, write managed code. I think it's write managed code. Yes, it's definitely the key theme. Said it a couple of times just to make sure. Write managed code. We're committed to taking that investment going forward and making sure that as you can migrate with us.
Yeah, and managed code is not an all or nothing thing, right? You can continue to use your existing code. You can continue to use your existing investment, and add additional functionality in managed code, and it's kind of a pay-as-you-go thing. And that's a thing that's commonly misunderstood.
And if someone wanted more information about Whidbey getting on the beta or stuff like that, where would they go? So
they can go to the Whidbey website on www.microsoft.com/Whidbey.
You'll see the icon right on the main page if you get lost.
Right.
Yep.
And when is the beta out already, or is it coming out, or?
Well, we are working on locking down the beta right now. The other thing that we've done are these community tech previews, which is kind of a, for MSDN Universal, I believe we've actually made a lot of drops available already along the way as a part of our whole community effort, the transparency effort that we're trying to do to help people see, where we're going. And I would also mention for the .NET framework, a great site to go to is got.net.com. As well, lots of samples, lots of download tools, information, and things like that.
Okay. And I understand you do a blog yourself?
I have a blog. I'm not the most prolific guy in the world, but I try and post good technical content. Weblogs.asp.net, whack Jason Z, and several people on my team have other blogs as well, including people like Brad Abrams and Chris Broom and folks like that. So a lot of excellent content up there.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll gather all these links together and stick them into the transcript so my viewers can take over the transcript, look at the bottom, and find links to all this sort of stuff so they don't have to take and figure out exactly what we were saying.
Quick notes.
Confusing. Well, thanks for joining us. I appreciate the talk, and hopefully we learned an awful lot about Whidbey.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that covers some of the aspects of what Whidbey and Visual Studio.NET, Visual Studio 2005, .NET Framework 2.0, and ASP.NET is all about. Hopefully we covered some things that you'll find useful in your own development. After this brief break, we'll take and come back and actually look at a demonstration of what Visual Studio 2005 actually looks like.
Within each of us, there are two sides. Which will you choose? This fall, prepare to take the journey of a lifetime. Fable. For every choice, a consequence.
Welcome back. Now today we're talking about Whidbey, or also known as Visual Studio 2005, .NET Framework 2.0, and ASP.NET. But Whidbey will do for now. In this segment, I want to take and focus on some of the programming capabilities. Now, most of you, I'm expecting, already are doing Visual Studio programming, because they're already familiar with the environment, some of the capabilities that we've done a number of enhancements to. But there's also some very new features that we're adding to the Visual Studio environment to make it far better for you to write applications. Here to show me what some of these new capabilities and features are, I have Rick LaPlante and Shanku Niyogi. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, earlier we talked about overall, what is Visual Studio, what are some of the capabilities, and what's the importance of managed code and stuff like that. From your standpoint, what do you feel are the exciting and compelling features that Visual Studio has that a in-the-trenches developer is going to say, wow, finally you're adding something that addresses the needs I'm having when I'm writing some applications?
Well, what we've done with Visual Studio 2005 and the .NET Framework 2.0 is really take a lot of the common scenarios that developers need to address in building applications and really look deeply at how we make developers much more productive at building those. And what we've done is built a set of features from the framework up and integrated them extremely well with the tool set so that it makes it much easier for developers to come up with those applications in less time and be able to extend them in richer ways than before.
So the things people are doing over and over and over again, we're saying, hey, you don't have to do it over and over again. We can do some of that work for you.
Exactly.
We know some of that stuff. And I know in the past with Visual Studio, we had the capability of when you start a new project, you say, okay, I want to create a new control, I want to create a new Win32 app, I want to create a new console app, and we kind of did some rudimentary code, at least to get some of the grunt work done. So you're saying we're extending upon that a bit?
Yeah, and in fact, one of the things that we're going to have in Visual Studio is a concept of a starter kit that's going to be common to all types of projects, whether you're building a web project or a client project or a project for a device or a smartphone that allows you to get a start when you're building a project. Start off with some common types of projects that include code that get you up and running. In addition, we've got a lot of features in the area of things like data binding, in areas of things like security and being able to do customization, personalization, things like being able to richly customize the UI of your app very easily. We've got a number of features there that allow you to do those things by writing less and less code and through the power of the tool set.
So have we added anything to the system to make it so that we prevent you from doing something really ugly in your UI?
So you can always, we do provide a lot of rope when we provide Visual Studio, but in all the tools from the client to the web, we have provided things that guide you towards being able to do better designs. On the client side, for example, we've got a number of mechanisms when you're laying out your form that allow you to snap your form to the different boundaries of the form in a nice way.
Nice.
And similarly on the web, one of the key things that we have is the ability to have master pages and themes that allow you to easily design or have a designer design the common consistent look of your page and be able to really easily create content that has that consistent look and feel and be able to manage that look and feel going forward.
Oh, nice. Let me take a look at what we've got here.
All right. So I'm going to build a application that's the web front end of a insurance site called Woodgrove Insurance. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually build out the customer-facing web front page of that. So let me go ahead and open a website. And one of the things that we've added in Visual Studio is the ability to create websites that are no longer just limited to front page server extensions, but can be opened from your local file system. So it's very easy to get your site up and running. And let me open the Woodgrove website here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a common look and feel, a common layout for my website, and then create my content so that it fits that common layout. And to do that, I use a feature of ASP.NET called master pages. I'm going to open a master page here that would typically come from a designer that kind of has a appealing visual layout with some common elements like a title bar, a navigation bar, and so on. And what I then do is use a content placeholder control. And a content placeholder control really defines the regions on my master that individual content pages can fill in. So if I go ahead and save this, I can then create a content page based on this master. And I'm able to click on this content placeholder and fill it in. Now you notice that Visual Studio shows you a really nice kind of combined view of what the page looks like, but it keeps you from being able to edit the parts of the page that come from the master.
So the grayed out part is stuff that's really not part of your page face at the moment.
Yeah,
that you're dealing with. It's stuff that the system will be providing automatically for
yes, it's part of the common look and feel of the site. So I can go ahead and create some custom content here, and I'll type something. If you look at the source code of the page, it's really simple. It's got just a page directive that points to the master page file, and then it has an ASP:content tag that defines the content that you fill in the placeholder. So if I go ahead and run this now, at runtime, ASP.NET will apply the page, the master to the page and show you the combined view. And so you can then continue to make changes to that common look in the master file and automatically have those changes reflected in all pages that use this master.
So if Woodgrove got bought out by some other company, you quickly go to the master page, change it in one location, and it automatically propagates throughout the rest.
So once I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and create a front page for it, and I'm going to put in some content. And one of the things that is really useful for web developers is to be able to create content that's easily personalizable by the user so that the user can actually see relevant content. Especially on a site like an insurance site, it's really important that users be able to register on that site, be able to see what content is relevant to them. And so one of the features that we have in ASP.NET is something called web parts. And web parts really provides a personalization infrastructure that's part of ASP.NET that allows you to create content that can be easily personalized with very little code. In the past, to be able to do something like this required tons and tons of code that was, fairly complex infrastructure, both on the server side in order to be able to manage users, manage their personalization state, and on the client to be able to do the kind of rich personalization in the browser that you require. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the master, and I'm going to drop in a control called the Web Part Manager control. And this is really the control that manages the web part personalization infrastructure for this page. And I'll go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go back to the home page now, and I'm going to just add a table in really quickly. I'm going to use the new table layout tools in Visual Studio, Studio's web designer. So once I go ahead and do that, the next thing I'm going to do is define a couple of regions within this content where I want to be able to show the different modules of UI that I want on this page. And I do this through a set of controls called web part zones. So I'm going to drag and drop a web part zone to these two columns. And what web part zones do is really not only control the layout of the controls that you put inside them, but they also control some consistent look and feel for each of those controls. So I've got a set of canned content controls that are just ASP.NET user control, and you can really treat any ASP.NET control as a web part. And when I go ahead and drag and drop this control into the page, you'll notice that it gets a common look with a title bar and a minimize and close icon. Similarly, I can drag some controls into the other web part zone. And I can actually take one of the web part zones and easily customize the content of that web part zone with different sets of styles. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that the styles that I change apply to every single control that's in that zone.
So these controls you're dropping in there, I mean, you're grabbing ones that are pre-made in some fashion like that. What if I had some custom controls and I take them were specific to my own website that I want to take and develop? Can I easily develop that inside?
Yeah, you can take any ASP.NET control, and I'll show this in a little while. You can build any ASP.NET control and use it as a web part within the web parts infrastructure to give that control personalized content.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and run this. And you'll notice I've got this page now. Now I want to take this page and start adding some content that's personalized to the user. To be able to do that, I first need to let the user come in and register on the site and be able to log on. And this is the kind of thing that was very difficult to do in the future, in the past, because you not only had to write lots and lots of code to manage users, but this kind of code was very difficult to get right because it typically involved making sure that you were securely managing user credentials, being able to authenticate people, and so on. And what we've done is built a set of application services for things like membership, for things like personalization on the server that make it very easy to enable these kinds of scenarios with little code. And then we've taken those services and we've created a set of controls on top of them that let you easily tie those into the UI of your site. So I'm going to go ahead and create a login page on my site. And I'm going to use that same master that I created earlier by just selecting the master page here. And now what I'm going to do is take some of the login controls that we have and put them on the page. The first control I'm going to put on the page is called a login control. And this is a control that basically allows users to come in and log into the site. Now to register, there's another control called a create user wizard control. And this control allows you to sign up for a new account. In the case of this demo, I'm just going to put this on a single page, although typically you'd want them on two different pages. And you can customize these controls in fairly rich ways. You can use templates to customize them any way you want, or you can auto-format them into some common appearances that we provide. So let's go ahead, now that we've created the login page, it's really as simple as that. Let's take a look at the source, and you can see the ASP login control is simply a single login tag with a run@equals server on it. Yet it manages the entire powerful feature of being able to go ahead and call the membership system to log people in and so on. So let's go ahead and save this. And the next thing I'm going to do is provide a way for the site to take the user to the login page. So let's go back to the master again. I'm going to add two more login controls to this page. The first control is called a login name control. And this is a control that really provides a greeting for the user once they're logged in. And you can customize that greeting any way you want. And I'm going to put on a login status control. And the login status control is an intelligent control that looks at whether the user is logged in or not and automatically displays either a login or logout link that does the right thing. So now I can go ahead and save this page and run it. And you'll see I've got a login button here. And when I'm taken here, I can click on this and go to the login page. I can go ahead and sign up. And the security question and answer, that's something that's enabled by default, so that when you've lost your password, another control called the forgot password control can actually allow you to retrieve that password.
Of course, with just a one-character password, you're probably not going to forget that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to simplify this in this case, of course.
By chance, does this control support the notion of insisting on a strong password?
So the membership system does provide you some means of having some enforcements on the password. Also, the login control actually provides events that allow users to hook up to the password or the create user process, so that you can actually look at the password and look at whether it's long enough or meets a certain certain
if you've got special requirements you're requiring out of the password, you can take and enforce that at that level.
And because this is still an ASP.NET control, you can actually expand this into a template where each of the controls inside it is an individual control, and you can use a validator control to easily enforce a certain minimum length or using a certain regular expression, enforce a certain set of rules on it very easily. So now that I've created the account, I can use the login control to log into the site. And now I come back to the site, and you'll notice that the login name control now shows my name, and the login status control now shows a logout link. So this kind of authentication into a site really required no code. It's easily customizable, but it just requires kind of dragging and dropping some controls onto your page. And it's a considerable step forward in terms of simplicity as well as amount of code you have to write from previous versions.
You know, I'm the type of person, I like getting in and touching the HTML and ASP code and stuff like that. All that I saw you doing was dragging and dropping and stuff like that. Am I still capable of getting in and touching the HTML and manually manipulating
and
at
in
that level?
fact, if I go back to the site again, I can go back to this login page. And one of the things I can do is select this login control, and I can say convert to template. And now, if I edit template, I've got an HTML, all the HTML of the control here. And I can go ahead and customize this any way I want. And if I go back to the source here, you'll notice the login control now has a layout template that's all HTML. And so I can go ahead and customize that in any way I want through HTML.
Oh, great.
So now I've got my user logged in. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a control to my site, as you were asking earlier, that allows you to provide some customized content for the user. And to do this, I'm going to show you some of the new data controls that are in ASP.NET. So let's go ahead and create a new user control as you would with ASP.NET. And we'll call it claims.ascx because we want to show the claims history for the currently logged on user. And I'm going to use a new data control called a grid view control. And we have a set of controls that are new to ASP.NET in 2.0 that allow you to achieve some of the common data scenarios in your web pages without really writing very much code at all. And let me drag and drop this control, sorry. And I'm going to choose a data source for this control. And I have a number of built-in data sources to choose from. Developers can also extend this through other data sources. I'm going to pick the object data source control that allows me to bind to a middle tier business object so that if I've got an end-tiered design, I can data bind my pages to that very easily. So here I can select from the set of classes that are available to me in my project, whether through the references or in the code directory of the project. I'll pick the insurance service. And I'm going to choose from the available set of methods on that class that conform to what looks like a select statement. And so really I'm mapping a kind of virtual concept of a select statement to a method on the object that I'm binding to. And I'm going to pick the lookup claims by underwriter. And it's got a parameter called agent ID. I could hook that parameter up to a number of things that come on my page, such as a value in a control or a query string. In this case, I'm going to leave it blank. What I'm going to do is add a line of code that binds this thing to the current user identity. So let me go ahead and do that. And I bound it to the page through the page object. I've retrieved the current user and bound it to their username. So let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go back to my home page again. And adding this control to my page is really as simple as taking that control and dragging and dropping it onto the page. And so now I've got the control, and you notice it automatically gets the consistent look and feel from the web part zone. Let's go ahead and run this.
Is using style sheets to get some of that, or?
It is, you can use anything from CSS to style properties on the web part zone in order to be able to display that common look and feel. You can also use the web part zone to control the layout. For example, you can have a zone that's laid out horizontally rather than vertically. So it's not displaying anything right now, but if I go ahead and log in, you'll notice it now has the claims information. And achieving scenarios like being able to sort your content or being able to page your content, that's very easy as well. I'll go back to this control. And on the grid view control, you'll notice that I've got this common set of tasks that easily pop up. And this is a new feature of Visual Studio for all kinds of applications that give you easy access to a common set of tasks. And I'm going to just click the checkboxes to enable paging and sorting. And the framework actually takes care of this for you by looking at the data source and looking at whether that data source's data is pageable or sortable. And so if I go ahead and save this and run the site again, log on again, you'll notice I now have headers that are pageable and sortable so that I can go ahead and sort. So those kinds of things required you to write a lot of code in the past. Now we kind of take care of them for you.
So you can focus more on specifically the content you're trying to provide, not how you're trying to provide that content to your users.
Exactly. And so now we've got some personalized content on the page, but we can really take this to the next level of personalization where users can actually control what things they want to see on the page and how they're laid out, what things are hidden, how the different modules on the page are laid out, and so on. And the web parts infrastructure provides some built-in support for this that allows you to personalize the page with very little code at all. This is something that actually existed previously in SharePoint, and what we've done in Whidbey is to take that infrastructure and put it in ASP.NET so that the next version of SharePoint will be able to also rely on this infrastructure and will allow you to take any ASP.NET control and use it in SharePoint, which is a great step from the past. So to do that, I go back to my master page again, and I'm just going to drag and drop a link button control onto the page. I'll call it personalize. And I'm going to hook up one line of code to this button that takes that web part manager that I created earlier and puts its display mode in a display mode called the design display mode. And the design display mode essentially allows users to be able to customize the design of that page. So let's go ahead and save that and run it again. I'll log in. And now if I click the personalize button, you'll notice that the page now changes appearance slightly, and I can take these controls and actually drag and drop them and move them around in different ways. I can close the ones that I don't want and so on. Richer customizations are also built in that allow me to actually edit some of the properties of these controls so that they show customized content themselves, or even add additional content that's not on the page by default back into the page. And when I go ahead and save this and I log in from any browser in the world into this website, I'm going to get this exact appearance that I've customized for my website. So this kind of customized, personalized experience, typically very difficult to write in the past, is now built in.
And it's like that's similar to what MSN and like say SharePoint's done. And I've looked at the code on those pages. That's pretty gnarly code. And so this way I don't have to do that code myself.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at the code of this page, we've got some web part zones that have the controls inside them, but no, if you view the code, you'll notice that there's no code at all. So in closing with what we've done with ASP.NET is really take some of these scenarios of how you build personalized content, personalized websites with the ability to authenticate users, to register users, so on, and really made those very easy to build with very little code, and as easy as dragging and dropping controls and customizing the appearance of them.
Yeah, when I think about Whidbey, Visual Studio 2005, the theme that we were going after broadly was really delighting our customers. And the first thing we did is we stepped back and we looked at the breadth of our customers. Shanku has shown you a bunch of work that we're doing for web developers, really to delight them to do a great job of really meeting their needs there, driving a lot of customer value. Of course, we're doing a ton of work around the WIM forms and the rich client work as well, and some really nice, interesting work around web services as well. One of the other things that we saw when we were looking at our customer base was most people who were using Visual Studio were actually working in teams. And when we thought about the logical extension of Visual Studio, moving from a developer-focused role where we were really a tool for a single developer or a group of developers collaborating, but really building up the infrastructure for building these types of applications, we realized that there was a big opportunity for us to drive customer value by expanding that role of Visual Studio from developer to development.
Now,
And
if I can state this correctly, doesn't Microsoft also develop in teams?
Yeah.
And so don't we have some experience maybe in understanding what a team might need in developing applications?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the secrets about the Visual Studio Team system, which is a new set of functionality that we're delivering as part of Visual Studio, is that a large percentage of the technology that we're delivering is actually based on work that Microsoft's been using for many years, in some cases 10 or 12 years. So we've taken a lot of the best practice that we have, that we use internally, and have sort of put it into a rich user experience, a customizable user experience, to help our customers drive a lot of productivity and then predictability into their development experiences. And that was really the focus of the team system, was to continue that theme of expanding the customer base, expanding it from the rich developer to the web developer to the mobile developer, and then to people really building in teams. And for the teams in particular, the focus was really on how do you enable communication, and how do you enable predictability in that sort of ever increasing complexity of building software. And so the focus was really on that, reducing the complexity and enabling the communication.
Interesting. You've got a demo to show us on that then too, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't I take a shot and show you a little bit of the team system?
Okay.
Okay, well, one of the things that I wanted to show you really first up here is for all of you developers out there that are really starting to do unit testing and trying to get the quality of the builds up much earlier in the process, where we know, the cost of fixing those things is the smallest. We've added integrated unit testing into Visual Studio. So one of the things that you can do is, if you were to have a typical VB project around, let me see if I can find a good one here. Like my new business logic. How's that one? And if you look at that, here's some basic VB code. One of the things I can do with the team system now is right-click and say create tests right from the IDE. And what this does is it uses reflection to decide what the methods are and you can create new tests at a namespace level, at a class level. In this case, I'm going to select a few methods here and basically say, go ahead and generate unit tests for these methods right from the shell.
When you say tests, what exactly do you mean there?
Well, here, let me show you what you kind of get. What you basically get is a set of, if you're familiar with NUnit, this probably looks a little bit familiar, or any of the unit type of tests. What it is it's basically we create a method that will call every method on the classes that you created. And so not only have we done that, but if you notice over here, what you'll see, if I go ahead and build the solution here, is that right over here, we have a test selector, which will basically, if I rebuild that thing there, list all of the tests that I actually just created. And so you'll see a bunch of tests show up here. There's do in-store pickup, and basically these are tests that were created to test those methods. Now, the other thing I can do from Visual Studio now is not only can I create those tests, but I can run them directly. So I'm going to select those tests, and I'm going to go ahead and say run them. Now, one of the things that we found that was really interesting when we talked to a lot of our customers is people were really starting to get the value of unit testing. But when you do unit testing, you don't really know if the time is well spent, because you don't know how much of your source code your application is actually exercising. So one of the things that we've done is we've enabled, sort of with the one click away, we've enabled the ability to do code coverage. So not only will you run your tests, but then you can find out exactly what software, what lines of code in your application your test actually covered. So I'm just going to enable code coverage here and tell it to run locally. And you'll see down here in the bottom of the screen in Visual Studio now a set of tests that are running, and the first one failed and the rest return inconclusive. It's actually by design, because if you remember, what I did is I generated the test cases and then actually didn't make them do anything. So by default, Visual Studio will return inconclusive on test cases that are generated without any implementations. Now, one of them here, another one of our methods here, I see actually threw an exception. But before I go and look at that, one of the things that I can do now with this information is I can look at my code coverage results. And I can look at it in the standard way, which basically means I can drill down into a namespace, into the DLL. I can come in here into the business logic class, and I can see the methods. And for each line, I can see that, you know, there were 66% of the lines in this method that were not covered, 22% were covered. And that's interesting for doing reporting and sort of check-in type of test. But one of the things that's really interesting is what exact lines of source code got covered. And so if I come up here, I can also look at the lines of source code that were covered in the editor directly. So I can see that green lines were covered. So these lines were covered with my test, the test that I just ran. Now here, a blue line is a partially covered. And in this case, the for each item was executed, but because there was an empty collection, it was only partially executed. It wasn't completely executed. And you'll see any of the lines that show up in the rest of the conditional loop aren't actually executed. And in fact, if I look at this and I notice that the return wasn't executed as well, what I find out is this line was the line that actually threw the exception. And you'll see that I never even executed the return here because the exception was handled somewhere else up the stack. And as you can see, these methods, which really don't do anything, were also covered. So that's integrated unit testing. And one of the things that we were really trying to focus on was if you make developers go out of their way to do their job, it's more challenging to get them to do it. And so the focus that we had was making integration a key feature, making integration into the developer experience very seamless, so that when the developer wanted to run his tests, they could run the tests from here, they could see the results. In this case, if there were methods that weren't covered, I would just simply right-click and say, create a unit test, or I would go in and, in this case, I would go in and add information to my order collection so that I would actually get more code coverage on this. So another thing that we've done is we've integrated load testing, which is a huge challenge when you think about building web applications today. And that is, how do you make sure that not only does it work on the developer's machine, but it works in production? And so I know that we've all heard the phrases from the developers like, well, I can't repro it, or it works on my machine. So one of the things that we've done is we've really tried to help with that situation by putting right in front of the developer the ability to create load tests. So one of the first things I'm going to do here is I'm going to first go ahead and create a new web test, which is a test that will basically drive an ASP.NET application. So I'm going to say, create a new web test. And I'm going to actually say I want to record this web test. So I'll call this, the show. I'll call it 1 because I think I have something out there already. And what you'll get is you'll get a custom version of IE with a little window on the side that's what we call our test recorder. So the first thing I'll do is I'll navigate to my storefront. In this case, we have a store called AdventureWorks that sells outdoor equipment. And you'll notice that as soon as I navigated it, an entry here in the recorder showed up as terms of navigation. Now, as I move around on this page, you're going to see the recorder actually recording all the actions that I'm making. So I would go to products, and I might add a really nice Visual Studio baseball there. And I'm going to check out. And I'll put I can type here. There we go. And go ahead and say, ship that to me. Review my order and say, yep, that's really what I want to buy. Now, I basically run a test. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that test. And right in Visual Studio now, we have the ability to run this test. Now, I can data bind this test. So if I don't want it always to be Rick LaPlante, I can create it so that there is a database of logins. I can change the profiles so that if I don't want just this test to be running, I might want tests where people are buying nothing, and I might want tests where people are buying hundreds of items. So I can create all of those tests, and I can, from Visual Studio, I can go ahead and just walk through and effectively step into this test. So if I do a step-by-step, you'll see we execute effectively the command, and you see the rendering of the page. But not only that, I can look directly at the request and the response. So this is the HTTP traffic that was going back and forth. I can see not only, obviously, the HTML body here, but as well, I can see it as it's rendered in the browser. So I can step through and see how what the behavior of my test was. And when I say, Yep, that's right. I'll just let this thing go ahead and run to the end there. Make sure it gets to where my order was sent. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. And we'll save off those results. Now, that was a single web test. It was a single test that ran against a server. Now, what I want to do is, for load, you actually want to be able to describe a bunch of behaviors that are running concurrently against a machine, because you want to understand what happens when 1,000 concurrent users or 10,000 concurrent users are on the machine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my testing project, and I'm basically going to say, which is right there, I'm going to say, now I want to add a load test. And if you've ever used tools to create load tests, they're pretty complex and certainly nowhere nearly integrated into Visual Studio. So one of the things that we're letting customers do, and that we found from our customer research, was developers are writing the load tests because they know the behaviors where they want to simulate the load. Now, the load tests are usually run by a set of testers, but they're almost always created in the first instance by the developers. So I'm going to go ahead here and just create another load test. And I'll call this one the show load. And just like with everything else in Visual Studio, where we really try and boil down to the core concepts, we basically run you through a wizard to let you create a load test. So the first thing I have to do is, of course, select the set of tests. Now I could select, I've got a bunch of tests here. I've got a set of tests that I recorded earlier. I also have my unit tests, so I can actually run those unit tests at the same time under load. In this case, I'm just going to select the show one test that we just created. It lets me do things like I can create multiple tests here and set the mix in terms of the set of tests that are being run, in what mix do I want to see them. I have a bunch of support around how the application behaves. Do I want it to just play everything back instantaneously, or do I want it to actually remember the think times as the user was using them? So there's a lot of rich control around there. We can simulate multiple browsers, and more importantly, we can simulate multiple connections. So we can say a certain percentage are coming through LAN, a certain percentage are coming through a mobile device, with all of the latency sort of impact that goes along with that. And finally, probably one of the most interesting features that we have in the load testing system is load testing. Creating load tests is one part of the problem, but understanding what the behavior of the machine was at the state when you were seeing load problems is a very different problem. And what we've seen is most of our customers don't have the context of what should I be collecting on the server, and what is good and acceptable server performance. So one of the things that we've done is inside of the team system is we've predefined a set of basically performance counter collections that you can customize, but out of the box, we've said this is a machine. When you told us about localhost, it has ADO.NET, it has application counter information, and so it has all of these different sets. So I'm going to say I want the load testing tool by default to collect performance information for me about ASP.NET and about IIS while it's running. The last thing I'm going to do is change the load profile. I want it to go from 1 user to 200 users, stepping up every 5 seconds. And finally, I want it to run for a minute, and we'll just let it run here for a second, just long enough to, where did my test go? Get over here and run it for you. The show load right here. And again, I'm going to start that up. And you'll see down here at the bottom where it says the show load is running and it's in progress. If we double click on that, we can actually see what's going on. I'm just going to let it run for a minute so we can see some of the interesting data here. You'll see that it's collecting performance counters. And by default, we collect things like the user load, the request per second, and then the average time to the last byte, which is really your the way of understanding the performance characteristics of the server. So I'm going to go ahead and
Now, one thing I'm noticing, I mean, like you're focusing on web-side testing.
Mm-hmm.
Do our tools also support the notion of testing smart client applications as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like for instance, if you had a smart client application that was hitting, I mean, this is a load test engine for a distributed system. So this will work in recording HTTP traffic to a web service. So you could use this to record the behavior of a set of calls from a client to a web service and then play back. In fact, we've got several groups inside of Microsoft using the technology today for that purpose. So one of the things you can see here is, as we're ramping up, the server is starting to cache the pages here, so we're going to start not seeing a lot of interesting information. So one of the things I wanted to point out here, though, is you see these little X's up here. Now, not only did we collect the performance information for you, but most customers don't know what a good value is, or a lot of customers don't know whether if disk idle time is under 20%, is that good or bad? And so one of the things that we've done is not only included the performance counters, but we've included thresholds for warnings and errors. And so I can click on this and see that the team system is telling me that there's something going on in the VSE 2004 machine that I should be worried about. And if I go down here, I can continue to drill in and see, okay, it's telling me, let's drag this over here, that the processor queue length, if I hover over it, you'll see the line in there. The number of context switches. These are, what it's highlighting for me is, these are values that are happening on the server that we think are going to be indicative of a load problem in the long term. And it lets people drill in to the information in a way that they look just at the things that are most likely causing the problem. And providing that context to them was a big part of what the focus of the team system was about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I have to show you.
So, I mean, overall, we're showing how we're enhancing the development environment. So it includes not only the coding model, the IntelliSense and stuff like that, but also including the notion of developing an application in team environment and getting not just debug information, but actually test information as well.
Yeah, and even actually more than that. The team system is very broad in terms of support for project management and support for architects. So there's a significant amount of modeling, application modeling that we built in there as well. So there's a lot of the breadth of the team and the roles. If you think about the roles in an organization, we're really expanding Visual Studio not just into the types of apps that developers are building, but also then into the different roles that are part of a development team.
Mm-hmm. So now, the unit testing that you're doing here,
mm-hmm.
since that was testing code path,
mm-hmm.
Does that also work against the smart client code as well?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the unit testing is really testing against the code itself. And that will work with smart clients. It will work with web services. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, moving forward, what do you see that we're working towards including additional features and capabilities in this whole team services stuff?
Well, I mean, our focus is going to be to continue to improve the predictability of the team. So the predictable, consistent success is sort of what we're all about driving. And so we expect, as we look forward to version 2 and beyond, to actually really focus a lot on the smart client as it relates to the work that's going on in Avalon and the work that's going on in Indigo, to make sure that we can deliver this type of value for the smart client application with those sort of technologies that are coming online. So that's a really big focus for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Shanku, where do you see things moving forward in focusing on the entire developer product coming out? I mean, whether it's ASP.NET or whether it's Smart Client, what are some of the main things that really need to be beefed up to support what the world out there is actually wanting in an application?
One of the things that we've been building in Visual Studio Whidbey that you saw in some of the ASP.NET stuff today is really kind of defining a model for an application. The kinds of things that you need in an application level, not just at the level of an individual, Windows form or a web page, and taking those kinds of application-centric concepts and making them really easy to build and manage, mm-hmm. and doing that through a set of services that are available to applications. And really going forward, what we want to do is be able to take those concepts and be able to use them in building any kind of application, whether it's building web applications, whether it's building smart client applications that are connected to a server, perhaps occasionally connected to a server, and so on, and being able to leverage your current investment in Whidbey to be able to build those scenarios easily going forward.
I mean, more and more, I mean, the server is becoming an active participant in almost all solutions being developed, whether it is a website or a smart client. I mean, web services make that server become an increasing value add to the equation. When I first started in programming, everyone was focused on, just that machine right there. As a matter of fact, even, networks were almost unheard of in those days. And when they were heard of, they were, just connecting one mainframe to another, and not connecting a user to any other user or any other application. It's when I ran applications that ran by themselves. And so we didn't need to focus on that so much. And the tools are slowly and gradually trying to address those issues and even jumpstart some of those capabilities. And so we're capable of writing applications today that would have been almost impossible to write without those tools.
Yeah, you have to think of, we have to think about an application in a very different way than we thought about it 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where an application was a monolithic piece of code and maybe some DLLs that were, late bound dynamically linked in. Now an application is, a set of bits on your machine and a set of services in the cloud and a database or several databases. And that new definition of an application and thinking about it that way allows us to imagine a lot of interesting scenarios of how we move the tool forward so that you can take an application level view from the frameworks, from the tooling, to really drive that the success of the customer in building that distributed application going forward, that smart client, that web-based client that are all connected via web services.
So as parting words, what do you think are some of the key features that our audience should be aware of what Whidbey is going to provide them in developing better applications in the environment, whether it's in the test environment, whether the team services environment, or whether it's in building better ASP.NET or smart client applications?
I think the key to Whidbey is taking things that developers, testers, the entire product team wants to do, and making it really easier to do them, to be able to have that workflow between the different models fit together very well by having it, all tie into Visual Studio, and really make the entire process more successful, more productive in every way.
Yep. Well, I think that if the users really start digging into the tools, I think they'll find that our focus on the delighting of the customer base and really partitioning out the customer base and really being clear about the smart client developers and the web developers and the mobile developers and the people developing in teams. I think they'll see in every instance features that are very new to Visual Studio that are about productivity, and in the end about increasing the predictability of their success, whether it be the team system pieces or the fact that they're writing 75% less code and the code is coming tested already for them. So I think that ultimately they're going to find that the predictability and the success that's going to be driven out of Whidbey, and I think they're going to be very excited about it.
And if they wanted more information on how to use some of these things, part of the beta programs to look at, where do you recommend they check out?
We have a number of resources on MSDN. There are a number of individual teams have community sites, such as for ASP, we've got a site on asp.net/Whidbey, and as part of the upcoming beta, we'll have a lot more information out there for developers to go and see.
Okay. Yeah. Do either of you guys have blogs, maybe?
I actually do have a blog. It's hosted on the blogs, the MSDN blogs, and it's under /Shanku.
Okay. Yeah, and for the team system, we actually just posted about 3 weeks ago a brand new site on MSDN. It's msdn.microsoft.com/vstudio/team system. And we've posted videos and white papers, and I have a column up there. So people will find a ton of information there, as well as the links to all of our news groups to get more information directly from the people working on it.
Okay, and I'll also make sure I take and gather those links from you guys and put them at the bottom of the transcript so people can take a look at the transcript of the show and see all the information about where to get more data about the beta, development resources, news groups, and blogs you guys think might be interesting.
Great.
Definitely.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thanks.
So hopefully that gave you some ideas of what some of the developer capabilities are going to be coming out of Whidbey. There are, of course, far more than we could possibly show in the time we have for this show. And so hopefully you guys will sign up for the beta, download a copy of it, take a look at it, and see where we're moving with Whidbey to help you with the development resources. Thanks for joining us.
With me today is Sterling McBride. He is a senior investigator in Microsoft's legal group. Sterling, welcome.
Thank you.
So Sterling, the title senior investigator fascinates me. You must be one of the few people at Microsoft that have such a great title. So what does that mean exactly?
It means I'm an investigator. I work in law and corporate affairs. I started off my career here at Microsoft working on anti-piracy issues. And about a year ago, I moved into internet safety. And our team is made up of lawyers, paralegals, and investigators. We have a team that is worldwide, and we do a lot of work on spam and phishing and matters of that.
Okay, so what specifically do you do with spam?
My job is basically to go and look to try to identify the people who are behind all the spam that gets sent to our customers at MSN and Hotmail. Try to identify those people and bring a case against them, either civilly or to refer a case to law enforcement for criminal actions.
Okay, how successful have you been with that lately?
We've been really successful. Our team's worked really hard over the last year. We've recently filed, I think, our 68th lawsuit this year. We've referred several cases to law enforcement when there's a lot of criminal actions that are still pending right now.
That's a lot. That's amazing.
It's been really a successful year, but a lot of hard work on our team's part.
So given the wealth and all these cases you've been bringing against spammers, when or how do you say that customers will begin to see the results of these actions, less spam in their inboxes?
Absolutely. The actions that we've been taking, both civilly and criminally, we believe has had an effect on the spammers that are out there. There's a lot of talk amongst them that they really need to start watching what they're doing and being more careful. But Microsoft's taken an approach against spam that goes beyond just the enforcement part that we work on. There's a unit that is working on technological solutions to it. We've also started to work with governments to try to get laws passed that will help us bring more actions against these folks, as well as educating consumers about the problem.
People, of course, know what spam is and know how annoying it can be. What are some things that people might not understand about spam?
Well, spam is actually the means for a lot of other internet badness. Spam is utilized oftentimes to send viruses, worms. It also is the means for people to do what are known as phishing attacks, where they'll send you an email pretending to be someone else, for example, Microsoft, and ask you for your personal information. And once they get it, then they utilize that to steal your identity, drain your bank accounts, and really wreak a lot of havoc on your life. So spam is more than just an annoyance. It's the means for creating a lot of other problems on the internet.
Okay, sure. So can you talk about any specific cases you've been working on?
You bet. One of the cases that we recently brought was about, was against a fellow who had sent some email pretending to be Microsoft, telling people that they had noticed that there was a virus on their computer, pretending like Microsoft was scanning their computers and had noticed that there was a virus on there. And in order to protect themselves, they needed to go to this website where they provided a hyperlink where you could download a fix. And in actuality, what you didn't go to a Microsoft website. What you ended up doing is going and loading a toolbar that they wanted to utilize to kind of track what you were doing online. We started the investigation and found out that the company that had registered the website was registered in Belize. And so immediately everyone's thoughts was, boy, it's going to be really tough to hold these people responsible. But after we started digging in and looking at it more in depth, we found out that there was a company actually in California that was behind all of it. And it was actually someone that we had had some run-ins with legally prior to this particular case. And we ended up filing a lawsuit against him late last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was a really interesting case. It took us all over the world and finally back to the U.S.
Right, you get to be your own detective case.
Yeah.
That's great. So do you have a background in law enforcement?
I do. Prior to coming to Microsoft, I was a deputy U.S. Marshal here in Seattle. I worked there for 6 years. And prior to that, I was a U.S. Border Patrol agent stationed down on the U.S.-Mexican border in San Diego, where I got to chase and run after people for thousands of miles.
That's fascinating. How did you get into that job?
Well, prior to that, I was with the Marine Corps, and once I got out of the Marine Corps, it seemed like a logical step to get into law enforcement.
So Mexico, the San Diego area is much different from the Northwest.
It really is. I was very happy, actually, to get back up here.
Are you from here?
I am. I was born and raised in Spokane, Washington, on the other side of the state.
Okay. So what are some things you like to do outside of work?
Well, I'm married and I have 4 boys. They're all getting real close to the teenage years. We like to play baseball. I normally will coach at least one of their teams, if not 2. In the wintertime, we all go go snowboarding, and in the summertime, we go wakeboarding. Spend a lot of time in physical activities outside of work.
I bet. You got a whole team practically.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually kid that we've got half of a baseball team and the better part of a gang on our block.
So do any of your sons express any interest in law enforcement type work in the future?
Not so much law enforcement, but most of them are quite interested in working here at Microsoft. They really look up to this company. And both my wife and I work for Microsoft, and just really talk highly of our work here. And they all really want to come here. Of course, they want to do things like program games for Xbox, but
Right.
that's the fun stuff.
Right, young boys' dreams.
That's right.
That's great. So what are some things that you see in your future at Microsoft or future in this current position where you want to take it?
Well, I think what we're really working to define this year are expanding. This was kind of our first year, first shot out of the blocks, and I think that we really did some great work. But we spent some time trying to figure out what are the next steps, going after a few more of the people that are behind these not only annoyances but other problems that we see in internet safety. And from there, I expect that I'll probably continue to do investigations, as it's really something that I enjoy doing, and maybe one day, I'll have a few other people who get to work for me and help me in this area. So
That's
that's
great.
what I'm hoping for.
Well, Sterling, thanks for taking the time today. It's been great.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the .NET Show.
And stay tuned for the next episode on Smart Client.
And until then, we'll see you on the web.